Antarctica, one of the most brutally cold places in the world. A frozen desert where no life exists except for at its melting edges.
In early January, as the work to move Halley progressed, I joined glaciologist Jan on a trip to investigate a new crevasse which had recently been spotted in the ice shelf.
Antarctica was never supposed to be alive. A continent entombed beneath miles of ice, no light, no warmth, no motion, declared scientifically inert for millions of years. That was the story we accepted. But what if it was wrong?
According to ancient astronaut theorists, Antarctica may not have been a frozen continent for as long as mainstream scientists suggest.
When a drill cut 40 feet down, it struck something impossible. Clear, stable liquid water, sealed from the surface and untouched by sunlight, and alive. Not fossils, not remnants. Living organisms thriving in total darkness. How could anything survive there? The answer only deepened the mystery. Beneath the ice lies heat, movement, volcanic systems, and rivers flowing unseen, quietly reshaping the continent from below. And the ice itself holds a memory. Ancient air trapped for over 1 million years, recording moments when Earth's systems collapsed and humanity nearly vanished. So, if the ice remembers our past, what is it trying to warn us about now? The lake that cannot exist. The research team that discovered Enigma Lake was not looking for water. They had traveled to one of the most hostile environments on Earth to study frozen ground and ancient ice formations. This part of Antarctica had a reputation that left no room for surprises. The surface was locked in ice and rock that had not moved for thousands of years. The air was so dry it stripped moisture from anything exposed to it. Snow barely fell, and when it did, the wind erased it within hours. By every known rule of physics and chemistry, liquid water could not survive here. The cold was too aggressive. The pressure was wrong. There was no heat source anywhere near the surface. Water in this environment does not flow. It freezes solid and stays frozen. That certainty shaped everything about the mission. The team brought equipment designed to analyze ice, not water. They planned to drill shallow cores and study the layers. Standard procedure, routine science. Then the radar screens started showing something impossible. Instead of solid ice extending deep below the surface, the signal changed. It bent and reflected in patterns that suggested movement, liquid movement. The researchers checked their equipment repeatedly. Faulty instruments would have been the easiest explanation, but every diagnostic came back clean. The readings were accurate. Something was moving beneath the ice. After hours of debate and growing tension, the team made a decision that carried real risk. They would drill deeper than planned. They would find out what was down there.
The team is using a 3-kilometer-long hose to blast superheated sterile water through the ice.
The drill cut slowly through ice that had not been disturbed in ages. Each meter added weight to the silence. Then, at roughly 40 feet below the surface, the drill suddenly lost resistance. The sound changed. The tension on the line shifted. The bit had dropped into open space, into liquid. For a long moment, nobody spoke. This was not slush or meltwater leaking from above. This was clear, fully liquid water sealed beneath thick ice. Water that had never seen sunlight. Water that had never touched open air. The shock was physical. Some researchers felt their stomachs tighten. Others stared at the readings in disbelief, struggling to process what they were seeing. This single discovery shattered assumptions that had guided Antarctic science for decades. As samples were carefully extracted, another unsettling detail emerged. This lake was not new. Chemical analysis showed the water had been there for an extraordinarily long time. It was not a brief melt caused by some rare warm event. The lake had layers, it had structure. It had a settled bottom that suggested a system in long-term equilibrium. This body of water had reached balance ages ago and maintained it ever since, hidden beneath ice that should have crushed any liquid out of existence. That raised a question nobody could answer quickly. Where did the water come from? There was no surface input. The land above destroyed liquid water instead of feeding it. The lake had to be supplied from below or from channels stretching across vast distances beneath the ice. Water was moving through this frozen continent in ways scientists had not believed possible. Antarctica, the place everyone thought was frozen solid and utterly still, was hiding an active hydrological system that nobody knew existed. Life in total darkness. When scientists finally analyzed the lake water and the dark sediment at the bottom, the truth revealed itself immediately. There was no slow build-up to the discovery. There was no ambiguity. Life was present from the very first samples, not faint traces or broken remains carried in by accident, not contamination from surface equipment. These were living organisms actively growing, changing, and shaping their environment in real time. The shock ran through the research team like an electric current. Many of them had prepared themselves to find nothing at all. At most, they expected perhaps some simple bacteria drifting in the water, barely surviving in hostile conditions. What they found instead was far more organized and far more unsettling. The floor of the lake was covered in thick microbial mats stretching across the sediment like a living skin. These mats were not flat or random. They formed layers stacked on top of each other, with each layer showing clear signs of growth over time. Some of these structures were thin and sharply defined, rising straight up from the lake bed like underwater towers. Others were dense, folded, and heavy, shaped by slow and steady accumulation over immense spans of time. A few stood nearly 15 inches tall. They held their shape instead of collapsing. They were stable. They were persistent. They were thriving in conditions that should have made survival impossible. This kind of biological structure takes time to form. It takes balance. It takes a reliable source of energy. And that was exactly the problem. This level of organization should not exist in total darkness. Almost every ecosystem on Earth depends on sunlight. Plants use light to create energy through photosynthesis. Animals feed on plants.
Plants and animals are also the main food source for people too. But plants are different, and how they get the food they need is truly amazing. They make food through a special process called photosynthesis.
Even microscopic organisms typically rely on chemical byproducts from light-driven systems. Under 40 feet of ice, sunlight does not reach the water. There is no photosynthesis. There is no conventional food chain. By every familiar biological rule, this ecosystem should have collapsed long ago. But it had not collapsed. It was flourishing. Further analysis revealed how these organisms had found a way to survive. Instead of relying on light, they used chemical energy. Minerals and compounds were flowing into the lake from below, carried by the hidden water systems threading through the ice and rock. The organisms fed on these chemicals, extracting energy through processes that did not require a single photon of sunlight. This meant the lake was not sealed in the way scientists had believed. It was connected to deeper systems, fed by underground rivers carrying heat and nutrients from sources far beneath the surface. That realization brought fear alongside the wonder. These organisms had evolved in complete isolation. They had never mixed with surface life. They had never encountered modern atmospheric conditions. They had never faced competition from outside microbes. This ecosystem had likely been sealed away for tens of thousands of years. Some evidence suggested it could be far older. It was a closed world operating by its own rules, maintaining its own balance, existing in its own fragile stability, completely independent of the world above. That isolation made it extremely vulnerable. Any contamination could destroy it. A single foreign microbe introduced by drilling equipment could spread through the water and devastate organisms that had never developed defenses against outside life. A breath of surface air could introduce bacteria that did not belong there. Once damaged, this ecosystem might never recover. There would be no way to replace it, no way to rebuild what had taken millennia to develop. Losing it would mean losing a direct window into how life survives in conditions once thought completely impossible. Standing above that silent water, researchers understood they were looking at something precious and irreplaceable. And they were terrified of breaking it. The hidden rivers beneath the ice. To understand how Enigma Lake could remain liquid in an environment that destroys water on contact, researchers turned to detailed chemical analysis. They examined the salts and dissolved materials suspended in the lake water, looking for clues about its origin. What they found ruled out simple explanations immediately. The chemical signature did not match surface snow or ice. It did not resemble frozen meltwater trapped by chance. Instead, it matched water that had traveled slowly and deliberately through rock and deep ice over enormous distances. This meant Enigma Lake was not alone. It was not an isolated anomaly. It was being fed by a hidden underground system that no one had expected to find in Antarctica. Water from distant glaciers was being forced downward by immense pressure, then pushed sideways through cracks and channels beneath the ice sheet. These pathways carried minerals and heat along with the water. Over time, they delivered everything the lake needed to survive and sustain life. The lake was a node in a network, a single point in a vast subglacial plumbing system stretching across the continent. This discovery fundamentally changed how scientists understood Antarctic ice. Ice, under this much pressure, should behave like solid stone. The crushing weight of miles of ice above should squeeze cracks shut and lock everything in place. That assumption had shaped decades of research. But the evidence from Enigma Lake showed something radically different. The ice had not sealed itself, it had fractured, it had stayed open, and water was moving through those fractures constantly, invisibly, beneath the frozen surface. The Antarctic ice sheet was not a single frozen mass. It was active. It was restless. Subglacial rivers were flowing beneath vast areas of the continent, linking regions separated by hundreds of miles on the surface. These hidden waterways moved slowly but never stopped. They carried heat that softened ice from below. They carried nutrients that fed isolated ecosystems in total darkness. They carried pressure that reshaped the ground beneath the ice in ways nobody could observe from above. The consequences of this hidden movement were alarming. For years, ice loss in Antarctica had been blamed primarily on warming air temperatures and rising ocean heat. Those factors absolutely matter. But Enigma Lake revealed another threat that operates invisibly, undetectable from the surface. Down below, water was reducing friction between the ice and the bedrock. Ice that should have been locked in place was beginning to slide. Glaciers were moving faster than models predicted. Their bases were thinning while their surfaces appeared unchanged.
As the planet warms, glaciers melt, causing sea levels to rise.
This made the danger almost impossible to detect until it was too late. Ice shelves could appear perfectly stable from satellite imagery right up until the moment they catastrophically failed. Cracks could spread from below, invisible to surface monitoring. Entire sections could weaken without any visible warning signs. By the time collapse began, the damage was already irreversible. The hidden water had been doing its work quietly and patiently for years, decades, perhaps centuries. The surface tells one story. What lies beneath tells another entirely. The fire beneath the ice. Antarctica is often imagined as a vast sheet of ice resting on cold, lifeless, stable ground. That image is comforting. It is also completely wrong. Beneath large portions of the continent lies something far more dangerous than frozen rock. Deep below the ice, the Earth is active. Heat is building, pressure is accumulating, and in many places, molten rock is waiting. Scientists have now confirmed that a massive volcanic system sits beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet. Dozens of individual volcanoes have been identified through seismic surveys and thermal mapping. Some appear quiet and dormant, showing no recent activity. Others display clear signs of heat release, gas emissions, and ongoing geological processes. All of them share one critical characteristic. They are buried beneath ice that in some places measures miles thick. That ice presses down like a crushing lid, containing forces that would otherwise reshape the landscape above. For now, that pressure keeps most volcanic activity suppressed. But the balance is not stable. It never was. Ice does not simply sit in place forever. Beneath the surface, subglacial water moves through cracks and channels. It carries heat away from volcanic sources. It melts ice from below. As ice melts, the weight pressing down on the bedrock decreases. When pressure drops, magma deep underground can expand. Expanded magma releases more heat. More heat melts more ice. The ice grows thinner. Pressure drops further. The cycle feeds itself. Computer models have shown that once this feedback loop begins, it can continue on its own momentum. It does not require rising global temperatures to keep running. It does not stop simply because surface conditions stabilize. The system becomes self-sustaining. Heat from below continues its work regardless of what happens in the atmosphere above. This realization has deeply unsettled researchers who study Antarctic stability. Volcanic heat can thin ice from below at rates that surface monitoring cannot easily detect. Satellites photograph smooth, white surfaces. Researchers measure snow accumulation and surface temperatures. Everything appears normal. But underneath, the base of the ice is weakening. Ice shelves lose structural integrity without visible warning. Stress fractures propagate through hidden layers. Then, failure happens suddenly, catastrophically, without the gradual warning signs that would allow preparation or response. When an ice shelf collapses, it removes a critical barrier holding back the glaciers behind it. Those glaciers then surge toward the ocean, moving faster than they have in recorded history. They release massive volumes of ice into the sea. The scale of potential consequences is difficult to overstate. Antarctica holds more than 70% of all fresh water on Earth. That water is locked in ice that has remained relatively stable for thousands of years. Even small destabilizations can cause significant sea level rise. Coastal cities on every continent depend on that ice staying frozen and in place. They depend on the volcanic forces beneath Antarctica remaining quiet. What makes this situation terrifying is the timeline. Volcanic systems do not operate on human schedules. They do not provide warnings that fit within political cycles or budget planning periods. Changes underground can proceed slowly for centuries, then accelerate without notice. Heat can increase, pressure can shift, water pathways can redirect. By the time surface indicators appear, the underlying processes may have already passed critical thresholds. The damage may already be locked in. The volcanoes beneath Antarctica are patient. They have been there for millions of years. They will continue their work long after human concerns have faded. The question is whether that work will remain slow enough for civilization to adapt, or whether something is about to change. The ice that remembers everything. While drilling deep into Antarctic ice to study its structure, scientists discovered something far more profound than geological data. Buried within the ice cores were tiny air bubbles that had been sealed away for nearly 1.2 million years. These bubbles were not contaminated or altered over time. They were locked in place at the exact moment the ice formed around them, each one preserving a small sample of Earth's ancient atmosphere precisely as it existed in that distant era. This discovery transformed our understanding of climate history. Previous records could only reach so far into the past before the evidence became too degraded or fragmentary to interpret with confidence. These Antarctic ice cores pushed that boundary back by hundreds of thousands of years. For the first time, scientists could examine chapters of Earth's climate story that had been completely inaccessible. The ice had functioned like a vault, storing planetary history layer by layer, protected from erosion, fire, decay, and human interference. Inside those trapped bubbles, researchers measured concentrations of carbon dioxide, oxygen, methane, and other atmospheric gases with remarkable precision. The data told a detailed and disturbing story. It revealed temperature swings that lasted tens of thousands of years. It documented the rise and fall of ice ages that transformed continents. It captured sudden climate shifts where conditions changed far faster than gradual models predicted. Patterns emerged, showing Earth oscillating between periods of stability and periods of chaos, again and again, across immense stretches of time. As the analysis deepened, one period stood out with chilling clarity. Roughly 900,000 years ago, something went catastrophically wrong. Genetic evidence from studies of modern human DNA suggests that during this window, the entire global human population collapsed to approximately 1,300 breeding individuals. This was not a gradual decline. This was near extinction. Humanity came within a razor's margin of disappearing entirely from the planet. Climate instability is now considered one of the primary drivers behind this population bottleneck. The ice cores captured the conditions of that era in precise detail. They showed extended periods of extreme cold that would have devastated ecosystems across vast regions. They showed abrupt transitions where climate shifted rapidly, destroying the predictable seasonal patterns that food sources depended upon. Habitable territory would have contracted dramatically. Migration routes would have closed, resources would have failed. Survival would have required extraordinary luck, adaptability, and resilience under relentless environmental pressure. For scientists studying these ancient layers, the experience was deeply unsettling on a personal level. They were not simply analyzing abstract data, they were looking directly at the environmental conditions that nearly ended the human story before it truly began. Each bubble of ancient air carried evidence of stress that our ancestors barely survived. The margin between continuation and oblivion had been impossibly thin. Antarctica preserves these records better than anywhere else on Earth. The ice moves slowly. It protects what it captures. Unlike forests, oceans, or soils that constantly recycle their contents through biological and chemical processes, Antarctic ice can hold material in stable isolation for over 1 million years. This makes the continent far more than frozen water. It is a storage system for planetary memory. It holds proof of how fragile Earth's balance can be. It shows how quickly conditions can turn hostile. It records moments when life thrived and moments when life nearly vanished. These records are clearer and more complete than anything found elsewhere. They are irreplaceable, and they are trying to tell us something. The warning we cannot ignore. The more scientists learn from Antarctica, the more a troubling pattern emerges. Earth has come close to catastrophic collapse before, not once, multiple times across geological history. These were not rare accidents or statistical anomalies. They were natural outcomes of complex systems pushed beyond their capacity to self-correct. Small changes accumulated. Feedback loops amplified initial disturbances. Thresholds were crossed. And once crossed, the consequences cascaded faster than any adaptation could match. Humanity survived those ancient crises through a combination of resilience and luck. Our ancestors endured conditions that killed countless other species. They found ways to persist when everything around them failed. But that survival was never guaranteed. The ice record shows how narrow the margin was. 1,300 individuals. That is all that stood between humanity continuing and humanity ending. One prolonged drought, one failed migration, one disease outbreak in that tiny surviving population, and the story would have been over. What scientists fear now is not merely what they have uncovered. It is what remains hidden beneath the ice. Volcanic systems that have been slowly building heat for millennia. Subglacial rivers that are quietly lubricating the base of ice sheets. Feedback loops that may have already begun their self-reinforcing cycles. The forces that shaped Earth's climate in the past have not disappeared. They are still operating. They are still capable of dramatic, rapid, devastating change, and many of them remain invisible to surface observation. Antarctica is not a frozen wasteland separate from the rest of the world. It is a critical component of planetary systems that affect every coastline, every weather pattern, every ecosystem on Earth. What happens beneath that ice does not stay beneath that ice. Heat rising from volcanic systems melts ice that flows into oceans. Oceans warm, currents shift, weather patterns destabilize, sea levels rise. The connections are direct and powerful. Ignoring what Antarctica is telling us does not make those connections disappear. It simply means we will be surprised when the consequences arrive. Antarctica was never supposed to be alive. A continent entombed beneath miles of ice, no light, no warmth, no motion, declared scientifically inert, frozen in time for millions of years. That was the story we told ourselves, until a drill cut 40 feet down and struck something impossible: liquid water, sealed from the surface, untouched by sunlight, and alive, not remnants, not fossils. Living organisms thriving in total darkness. And that discovery cracked the ice wide open. Because beneath Antarctica's frozen shell lies heat, movement, volcanic systems, and rivers flowing unseen, rewriting everything we thought we knew about the planet's most hostile place. Even more unsettling, the ice itself holds a memory. Ancient air, locked away for over 1 million years, recording moments when Earth's systems failed and humanity nearly vanished. The ice remembers. And what it's revealing now may be a warning we can't afford to ignore.